I wanted to do a little story time today of how I went from lot attendant to advanced mechanic at my former dealerships, and this video is more for those who are either curious of the steps that I took and want to follow the same path, or those of y'all who are just watching YouTube videos while you're doing dishes, working on your bike in the garage, or even at work and listening to this as background noise. Now, I know I have a previous video when I first started the channel of becoming a mechanic with no background education. It's a little similar to that video, but that video more dives into the topic of that it is possible. It's not necessary to go take a loan out and go to a technical school in order to enter the field of mechanics. This video, I more want to just kind of list out the steps that I went through that kind of I brushed over in the last video and that video, and more kind of head towards the storytelling side. Now, a lot of y'all know who have been following this channel for a while that before I got into motorcycles, I was a high performance tennis coach, and I was very proud of the job I had, but then I started riding motorcycles and that just took over everything. Before I started riding, I didn't know anyone who rode, so it's not like it was part of my social circle or my surroundings that kind of pushed me to it. But once I started riding, I knew that it would be a big passion of mine. I absolutely fell in love with it more than I thought I would. And I knew I had to leave my job and I wanted to do something around motorcycles. And it took me a while. I didn't right away go become a lot attendant. I knew that I couldn't be really anything else. It took about 2-3 months of me mustering up the courage to go apply. But once I started applying to the Harley-Davidson near me, I applied many times in order to get my foot in the door. Because, you know, with my background being a tennis coach, no dealership experience, no motorcycle experience, I knew they weren't gonna give me a chance that easy. Plus, it was around the time of COVID, so that was already a difficult time to find a job. The reason I wanted to go to Harley-Davidson was I could care less about Harleys. I didn't even have a Harley at the time. At the time, I had a CBR 1000 sport bike and a Kawasaki Vulcan 750. And I never had dreams of owning a Harley. I didn't have no hype around it. But I did know that Harley-Davidson was a really big brand. It was, it's like a rock star brand. It's however you might feel about it, and disregarding all the stuff going in the news, you can't deny the legacy and just the status of the brand as a whole, aside all the political stuff. And I figured, if I was going to enter the motorcycle field, it was going to be for the biggest and the best, or nobody at all. I didn't want to just, at that time, I didn't want to just go to some mom and pop shop, even though, now if I did want to be a mechanic, I would probably go that route instead of dealership. That's not the point though. So when I decided to go join the Harley-Davidson near me, I applied many times, and I finally got a chance at an interview. And when I was talking with the HR lady who was interviewing me, she told me I could either go to sales or service was looking for a lot attendant, but parts department wasn't hiring. And I don't think motor clothes was, but I'll be honest, even if they were, I don't think I would have chosen to go work for motor clothes. Nothing against them, but I kind of wanted to be more around, the garage side. I didn't really want to be on the other end of the store. Plus, I always had a bad taste for sales. My dad was a car mechanic, so I already knew a little bit of what goes on behind the scenes at dealerships regarding the sales department. And I just didn't feel like my morale was capable of working in such an environment. I didn't realize that working in the back of the dealership would also have its own dirt as well, but those are things I have discussed in a previous video if you're curious about. So when I finally got an interview with the service manager at that first dealership, pretty much all I had to do was prove that I knew how to ride a motorcycle. I think they understood that I really wanted the job just from the amount of times I had applied, and I was applying in person. I wasn't doing online applications. I would bring them application, and each time, knowing they already had one, I would bring one in, you know, and I really feel like persistence is key. When you really want something, you'll find a way to get it. So I knew one way or another I would get that job. That might sound a little egotistical, and I don't mean it for it to come off that way. They did warn me that with me starting off as lot attendant, that I would be getting a huge pay cut compared to what I was making as a tennis coach, and I was totally okay with it. On evenings and weekends, weekend evenings, because I did work weekends as well, or my days off, I had a second job riding Lyft, which is like Uber. I'm sure everyone knows what Lyft is now, but that was kind of to make up for what I was losing. But I knew that that was the sacrifice I was willing to make in order to get my foot in the door. And I really had no plans. It was kind of, I jumped on the wave and was like, I'll see where this goes. I didn't initially plan to become a mechanic. I didn't have plans to be a service writer. I just knew I wanted to be around motorcycles. And I figured that once I got around them all the time, I would figure out which next step to take, you know? And I didn't see anything wrong with that logic, because I knew one way or another I would never sink. I would never let myself sink. So to me, it just seemed like a logical choice. When I started being a lot attendant, I knew that they did tell me, I was the first female to be working in the back of the shop. And so I wanted to make a good name for myself. I didn't want them to think that because I was a woman that I was less quality of a worker. So I made sure every bike I cleaned was as if I was cleaning it for a cleanliness competitions of motorcycles. And it got to the point where my service manager told me to tone it down a bit on how much effort I put into cleaning them, because on the days that I wasn't cleaning them and someone else was on my days off, that he didn't want customers to expect that type of quality each time and have potential issues, which is kind of a bad thing. But it's like, it looked good for me, but on the department side, it's like, shouldn't we strive to make it as clean as possible if we have the time for it? But that's not the point as well. But I always wanted to make sure I was busy. I knew that, people are always watching. People are always watching you, even if it doesn't seem like it, and even if you're on the lowest of low positions. And at that dealership, pretty much as low as you could get is being a porter or the person who cleans bathrooms. And when that person wasn't there, I was the person who they would tell me to go clean the bathrooms and clean everything else. And I always did that without complaint. I didn't, even though that wasn't part of my job, I felt like putting in the extra mile would get me to be noticed more better. However, I did quickly realize that I was gaining a good reputation for my work ethic, because when I wasn't washing bikes or, doing some duty that they told me to do, I made sure to always look busy, whether it was cleaning the techs' areas, sweeping if they were on a cigarette break or they were off that day, or whatever it might be. I was cleaning their work areas, taking their trash out. I tried to always make sure I looked busy. And if I knew that there wasn't much to do, I would stretch it out a bit so there wouldn't be much gaps of me not doing anything, because even if I had completed everything, I knew it'd still look bad if I was sitting and doing nothing. And I think, again, that's also bad on the side of management. Like, if you completed everything possible and you're just sitting because there's nothing else to do and they get mad at you for sitting, it's like, do you not want me to do a good job? Or and I've seen this many times in various jobs that I've had, just throughout the years. So I know this is a thing. So I knew kind of to pace things out accordingly. But the moment I started really hearing, people telling me that they're noticing my work ethic and noticing how I was always busy and always trying to do something, that's kind of when I felt that, oh, I can potentially grow here. They trust me. They believe in me. So I knew I had to make some sort of stance. I knew I just couldn't stay as a lot attendant forever. I knew I got my foot in the door. So now I needed to figure out what was the next door I was going to head towards. And it was in those moments of, being in the back, seeing all the guys working on bikes, that I knew I wanted to do that too. Plus, being into bikes myself, I had run into an issue once, and this was while I had worked as this was while I had worked as a lot attendant. I went riding with a group of friends on my Kawasaki Vulcan because I sold my sport bike in order to make up for, having a huge pay cut. So I wanted some rainy day savings. So I sold my sport bike, so it was worth more than the Vulcan. And we were riding, and I still didn't know much about bikes other than how to ride them. We went out on some slippery roads. It was a wooden bridge and it was wet on a curve. So it was a wet wooden bridge on a curve, and we all fell. And I know we all fell because we were all beginner riders, and I think we all hit the brakes a little bit on that turn out of how wet I don't know. I don't want to make excuses. It was just due to us being novice riders, and that's probably as true as it can get. And I remember I was having some issue with my Kawasaki Vulcan, which this is not it, it's long gone. And I believed the guys when they told me what was wrong with it. Or they had told me I had 2 air filters on that bike. And one of the dudes told me one of them is a dummy, it's just for cosmetic, it's not the real air filter, it only has one. Maybe he was used to Harleys, I don't know. I just believed him and I didn't even question it. And I remember one time I was wanting to service my Vulcan, and I was just curious, and I opened it and realized the bike had 2 air filters. And it pissed me off a little bit that I just took their word and believed them just because it was a guy, they ride motorcycles, they know everything. And I didn't want to be in that position again. I wanted to know what's wrong with my bike and to be able to work on it and, just kind of not be played as a fool. Even though that dude probably believed he was right, he wasn't trying to, no hate towards him. But I just didn't want to be in that position again. So on top of that feeling and seeing all the guys work on bikes, while at work, I started vocalizing that I too one day wanted to wrench on bikes. And slowly one of the techs, he wasn't a master tech, very wonderful gentleman, he also didn't stay, a lot of techs had quit when I had quit, but I will get to that in a little bit. But he was one of the good techs there. And when my service manager was not working, he would let me shadow him once I, finished washing bikes and everything I had to do was done. And on those days I would do it fast, knowing that he would let me shadow him. And he would even eventually let me do the services, but he walked me through everything, checked everything. He was literally by my side as I did everything and worked on, the bike he was working on, but I only did services. And he explained the hows and whys to everything. And with time, word spread around the shop that I was working with him. Well, he was like shadowing under him and whatnot. And the word got to my manager. And my manager, he wasn't a real fan of it because he wanted me to stay in my position. And I could understand that, so we tried to keep it hush-hush, and I didn't want anyone to get in trouble, so I made it seem it wasn't as frequent as it ought to be, and all the guys back there were all for it. So it's just more of people talking, and word spread. It wasn't in a bad way that, they were talking about it. Everyone was all for it, and they thought it was cool and whatnot, except the service manager. And eventually, I got offered the position of, it only took a short while before they allowed me to get promoted to service writer. Now, all the techs warned me not to take the position as service writer. And I have heard of a few techs, even at that point, who started as a lot attendant, went to service writer, and then became an apprentice in the back of the shop, or started off just right away at service writer, and then transferred to the back of the shop as an apprentice. I do know that, I knew that was a possible route. But they were all telling me I was only taking myself a step further away from getting closer to becoming an apprentice. And I believed them. It's not that I didn't believe them, but one, I was getting tired of how much I was working. Between 2 jobs and then, not having any free time, I knew that if I accepted service writer position, it would be a noticeable pay increase. So that was also, kind of something that pushed me towards that. But I knew I would learn more if I was taking in work orders and hearing about customer complaints of issues that frequently happen on bikes, and I would get used to terminologies better. And for me, I thought it was the right route, and I ended up just listening to my gut feeling. And in the end, that was the right choice to do because it did get me to the back of the shop a little bit pretty quick because I was the only service writer for just a few months also. I started working there in June, June. And by January, I was already an apprentice. So I had two, promotions within a few months. So things moved pretty fast. But when I was service writer, that's when I got my Sportster. But she was stock when I got her, except she had different pipes. And I had befriended people by then in the motorcycle sphere. And I did some trade-offs where I gave my pipes to someone, and I got this Bassani, and I paid, I paid for a new air filter. I took some T-bars off the bike, took a whole front end, got these bags, and so I took off the spoke wheel that was in the front. So on my days off in the evenings, I would sometimes be in their shop working on my bike and changing it all up. And I remember the day I brought it to work. Everyone knew I was working on it, but they're like, when are we gonna see your bike again? And I remember when I brought it in, everyone was, they showed that they're proud of me, and they were kind of surprised that I internally wired T-bars by myself and, did all this work, I never even did an oil change for my bike and took off the whole front end and whatnot. So I know that had made a positive impact on the manager trusting me, like that, I'm a little bit mechanically inclined at least, or, he gained a little bit of faith in me. And I know that probably had sparked the seed in his mind in the conversations with the upper management started rolling. Because one day he came up to me, my service manager, and told me that I was gonna have a meeting with him and the owner of the store regarding me, becoming an apprentice in the shop. Before I even get into that meeting, I want to say one thing before we continue with just the story. I know I have stressed, and I am not talking about it in this video, but I do want to bring it up. I have mentioned in the past that my experience in my first dealership was very bad. And this is definitely true. And it definitely got worse once I became a mechanic, mainly due to one specific technician who I'd worked in the back. Not my master tech, but another master tech who was there. And I've mentioned that I will talk about this in the future. I'm just not ready to do that. I just don't know how as well, because those events that transpired put me in a very dark place. It was those events that transpired that caused me to move out of state and leave everything behind as a way thinking that I needed as a form of safety, I've definitely, moved past it, and it's all in the past, and I know, nothing bad is gonna come my way from all that. But I do know when I do talk about those events, because I do want to share my experience one day, I want to do it respectfully. I don't want to do it in a way that just trashes Harley-Davidson as a brand, because while the dealership's upper management definitely had some flaws, and they definitely handled the situations very dirty, and especially what I'm about to bring up with this meeting, my first meeting with the owner regarding me becoming a mechanic, their mindset towards of how they approach things was way different than other dealerships. And I don't want to say that all are the same, because my second dealership was a day and night difference. It was absolutely amazing. They treated me with the utmost respect. And there was only one time that, someone kind of said something out of place, and the guys in the back were ready to tear the dude's head off. They always had my back. They always were, they always felt like my big brothers, and that, they just wanted to protect me. So I can't say that all dealerships are bad or all dealerships are the same, or, that's the woman experience of working in a man's world. And granted, being a woman in a male-dominated field does come with some baggage of its own, because, you're entering a universe that has been the same for a long time, and it's not going to change just because you enter it, But that first dealership was just kind of a rotten apple in a basket. So that's why I want to do it with respect when I get to that topic. It was just a lot of things in the spectrum of, being sexually harassed and threats being made, and as well as sexist comments. I knew right away from when I had that meeting with the owner of the dealership that there were some red flags, and I saw them right away, but I also saw it as an opportunity for me to enter the next door. And I knew that even if it was going to be bad, I would stay there just long enough to gain experience and then move on from there. And I stressed that in the other video I've made, that even if, like, say it doesn't even matter if you're man or woman. If I've seen guys have bad experiences just from a toxic workplace. So it's not just the woman thing. Men can have bad experiences too, just, for having a different personality that, that doesn't fit in with the majority in the group. I knew that I could just work there a little bit and move on. So anyways, that's not really the point I'm trying to get to, but I just felt like I had to say this topic, or I wanted to cover it briefly. One day I know I will talk about it in detail and really say concrete A, B, C, and D happened, but I will not go into it in this video. So while I'm about to bring up one red flag in that meeting that was said, I'm not going to talk about the actual bad things that happened in the shop once I got back there. That was a long, intermission. So I'll continue where I left off. I got called into a meeting with the owner, and he right away, he knew that there was a lot of word going on for my work ethic. He already also heard that I was shadowing and, I had worked on my bike. So, he kind of gave me credit for the things I was doing in the back and what capabilities I was showing to possibly possess. And he had brought up a news article how in Florida, and now this was not a Florida dealership, I had not lived in Florida at that time, of a chick she was the first black chick mechanic in her dealership. I don't know if it was for the whole state of Florida or just her dealership, but they made a whole news article about her. And he said that, we want to give you a chance to be a tech. Then eventually, once, you level up a bit, we want to write a news article about you because it's going to make the shop look good and it's going to make him look good. And, it's going to benefit me and benefit him. And I right away, I didn't like how that was the condition of me accepting that position, that I was more of a token piece. But I also knew that I wasn't going to turn down, a chance to get a step ahead a little quicker than if I would have waited out for it to naturally happen versus like this. The owner told me right away they were going to send me to the first Harley training classes. When I became Apprentice, that was in January, and I did my first class in beginning of February. So it was pretty much right away I went to my first class. But they put me to work under the master tech of that dealership who had been there for over 20 years. And I was very intimidated of the dude. That dude is your cliche angry mechanic stereotype. But I'll tell you, I got to know him as we worked every day together. And he is one of the most amazing people I've ever met. He had such a big impact on my career and my approach towards just being a technician. He's the type of guy that I think everyone wishes was their mechanic. The dude was just a walking manual, and he had a very good, he really cared about his job and the effort and the outcome of his work. And I was very blessed that I got put with him, even though at that time I was very intimidated, and he was the only tech I didn't talk to when I was shadowing or when I was a Lot Attendant, because he really intimidated me. He was a very serious man, and he came off always grumpy. So I was like, oh, I made a mistake. I should, what am I doing? What am I doing? Like, it's about to be torture. It's about to be, what did I set myself up to? But I still took it. I knew, you can't always have the easy path or have it the way you would expect it. Even though if I would have had it my way, I would have chose probably someone else. But in the end, it wouldn't have been such a good outcome or the right choice. So it was one of those moments where I'm glad things didn't go the way I had wanted to, because the way things went was much more better than I would have ever set out to, make. But he was all for it. He definitely was all for it. And, you know, he liked my approach. I asked him a lot of questions, and I know he had respected that. And I would follow up a question with a question. Because if I don't understand something, you know, I'm gonna want to know. You know, I know it's okay to not know, but when you don't know something, you have to find out. You can't just continue on not knowing once that question appears in your head. So, you know, he always got a kick of just how many questions I was asking, and if I had finished a service and he was doing an engine breakdown, I would shadow him. And the dude is just, I could probably make a whole video on just how amazing the dude is and how thankful I am for him. But I had worked under him for 9 months, and he was never aware of the bad things going on, because they never happened when I was around him. They only happened when he was off or he was not around. And I think the people, well, the main person, but I think the people who were causing me problems, they knew I wasn't speaking up about it because, well, I don't know if they just knew I wasn't going to speak up about it, so that's probably why they continued. I didn't want to come off as a drama queen. I knew that I was the first female in the back of the shop, so I didn't want to cause problems. So I stayed quiet about all the bad things happening, and I just figured with time they would stop, but instead they only got much worse and much worse till it was actual threats happening. And it got to the point where I was really deciding, you know, that I need to quit, that I didn't feel safe at my job anymore. And it was right at that moment when my master tech told me that he's putting his 2 weeks in and he's going to another shop due to issues he was having with upper management. And we already had 2 other techs quit as well, like right around that time too. And right when he told me that, I knew that if he left, I was about to have a terrible work experience. And so I went and put in my 2 weeks notice that same day. It was when I put those 2 weeks notice in that everyone kind of found out about why I did, because obviously they asked me about it. I didn't say right away, I just said I was quitting, but I got brought up into HR and she was really trying to talk me out of quitting, and she was really pressuring me why, and I told her, and I will not go into that discussion, even though that situation was handled extremely terribly by the people upstairs once they found out about it too. But again, that's not the point of this video. All that time from January to, it was I think October when I quit, for those 9 months or 10 months, I had worked as an apprentice under my master tech. And I did 2 Harley classes. I went to 2 Harley classes in that time. And I was still considered as an apprentice even when I quit. However, when I went to my next dealership, they were the ones who reached out to me. I didn't reach out to them. I just got an email from them one day because they had found my application on some motorcycle website, motorcycleindustries.com, if I remember correctly. And the manager of that dealership reached out to me. He really liked, he liked what he saw. He called my master tech, he called my references, and really liked, you know, what they had to say about me, especially what my master tech, the word he put in for me. And so I moved there because I was looking for dealerships out of state, and they reached out to me. They didn't start me off as an apprentice. They right away kind of, I remember in my first week of being there, they told me to fix a primary leak and, you know, put in new seals behind the inner primary. And all I knew ever was just oil changes. They'd probably done 1 brake flush. I was very much a still novice tech, but they, you know, he trusted me, and, you know, I would ask, you know, I had a manual. One of the guys there kind of, every time I did the job for the first time, they kind of shadowed me to make sure I did everything correctly. But right away, I started progressing very fast in the second dealership. They sent me to multiple classes as well, and I was leveling up. And they started giving me more difficult jobs, you know, along the way, until I realized eventually that I was really a big fan of electrical diagnostics. I don't know, something about that to me was like fixing a puzzle piece, and no one in the shop liked electrical diagnostics. So it was a win-win situation. And I liked doing T-bar, or not T-bars, but wiring handlebars, and no one else in the shop liked doing that too. So that was a win-win situation. But just anytime they gave me a job that I felt like was above my knowledge level, I just did it much more slowly. And the manager knew I was like this. I told him right from the get-go, like, if you're gonna give me a tough job, I will do it, but I will do it very slowly, and for him to expect that. And he was totally okay with it, because I'd rather do it right the first time than have it come back and do it twice. So I would utilize my manuals, and if I didn't understand something from there, I would ask for additional help. And even just that alone, just trying to figure out something that you've never figured out before, the whole act of it is also learning, and just going through that very frequently, I feel like made me progress much faster than maybe if I had, I don't know, I just felt like that just made me progress much faster, because I knew I was growing very fast in the second dealership too with my reputation. And eventually I took the final test for advanced mechanic, and there is 3 engine teardowns I had to do, and then two transmissions I had to take apart and rebuild. And then as well as an electrical diagnostics class. And I passed all those, and that's when I got my advanced technician badge. And I knew I was 1 test away from getting my expert badge, was just another electrical diagnostics class, but I quit and moved to Florida 2 months before that. And to me, it wasn't worth sticking out 2 extra months just to earn that badge. Just life pushed me in a different direction. But I will say, if you're curious, or if you're feeling to go down that route, and you're not just watching this to, watch the next video I put out, as I said in the other video, I believe anything is possible as long as you have the will to make it happen. And I knew that I wanted to be a tech. I knew I wanted to have a good reputation as a tech. So I was willing to handle all the challenges that came my way. And I feel like you have to have that mindset, because I've seen apprentices, and I've had apprentices that I had taught. Well, I had 1 apprentice I taught, and there was another apprentice in the shop who he didn't work under a nobody, but we kind of all, taught him stuff. He wasn't under just 1 person. And sometimes I've come across people, that mentality of, well, I don't know this, so I shouldn't have to do this job, or like, this is above my pay grade to do this job. And I feel like that's a bad approach to have. Dealerships, or at least, from my experience, they're really understaffed. And on top of being understaffed, there's not that many techs who are there and really care about their job. There's quite a few who are there just for the paycheck and go home, or just kind of gave up on the search of something else. They were there and they're stuck. They feel that they're stuck there and they're just there. If you're wanting to enter the field, I would really hope that you have it in your heart that your intentions are not just to enter the field, but also to enter the field and be the best possible version you can be at it. And all the roadblocks, or not even roadblocks, but all the obstacles you get along the way, view them as opportunities of stepping up and learning and broadening your knowledge and skill set, instead of having that, oh, I can't do that, I wasn't taught this yet approach. It's not rocket science. None of this is rocket science. And everything is difficult just because you don't know, because once you know something, it's really easy. And even engine teardowns, when you've never done one, it's very intimidating. But once you've done 15 or 20 of them, it's just a puzzle piece that you've done many times and you're putting back together. So I believe growth, especially in the field of, wanting to be a mechanic, a lot of it comes from, especially having a fast growth up the ladder, and dealerships, or, people wanting to take the initiative to train you to the next level, and whether it's to send you to classes or give you higher jobs, it mainly comes down to the effort you put in and how you present yourself and how you approach your work and your work ethic. I stand firm by this all the way. And I know I've dived really deep into this, I could have maybe gone through it faster, and I probably said more than I should have had. I know it's easy for me to just talk and talk and talk. But if there's things y'all are curious about, write them in the comments. I definitely, a lot of videos I make are from suggestions that y'all have made or questions y'all are curious about, so I'll make a whole video on that topic, and I'm all for it. I love to talk, and if there's something specific y'all are curious about, like the dealership secrets when I talked about the dirty things that go behind, service shop walls, that was due to a comment I had seen, and I was figured, oh, why not? That'd be a good video to make and to talk about that topic. And I know I want to talk about, in the future of, why dealerships don't work on older bikes, and I'm sure there's more. I can't think of any right now, but if, what I'm trying to get to, if you have suggestions, let them, leave them. This video was much longer than I initially had planned it to be, but I knew I was going to go at it more of a storytelling approach versus a just point, okay, the end, y'all have a great day. So I hope y'all watched it to the end, and yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah, I think that's about it. So with that said, I really appreciate, y'all watching these videos, showing your support. I do want to give out a quick shout out to the people who have donated recently to the channel. I really appreciate it. I do have a link below in the description for anyone who is curious or, wants to support the channel a step further so I can, have more adventures and make more videos for y'all. But besides even that, even just commenting and liking, and even down to the silent watchers, I do appreciate all the support y'all do. And with that said, I wish y'all a great day. Y'all stay safe, but most of all, don't forget to spread love and love those around y'all.